think what is timeless, not only his recordings, the interpretation, but the songs, the melodic elements of the songs. And when you're thinking about an instrumental album, always pick on the melodies, because when you translate a vocal rendition into an instrumental rendition, you must have a melody to go with to create an arrangement that will suit. In addition to the other elements, which are rhythmic elements, the soloist elements, and in this particular case, we were lucky to be able to get, for this recording session, some of the members of the Elvis band and some of the soloists who play with him. And this made something very special out of this project, because without that, and also without the Memphis Symphony as being part of this symphonic concert, which is a symphonic concert, it's not just another recording with some strings attached. This is really created arrangements that are symphonic in nature, but keep the element of the music as it was in the original recordings.
I equate Elvis, I'm sure, in the same sense that Europeans do. You know, he's very big in Europe, as you know. This thing with Elvis Presley has worked into a movement that is the same sort of thing that James Dean had, or even back as far as Rudolph Valentino. The number of fans that Elvis had were just innumerable. I mean, I don't think they really knew themselves until it finally happened, what was the reaction that they would have towards this thing. But the interesting thing about it is that it seems to keep going on.
Elvis's style was sort of it wasn't something new, I don't think. I just think he did it better than most of anybody else ever done anything before that. It had to be good, and it had to stand the test of time, because it's still here. We're talking about 40 years later almost. And things don't last that long unless they've got some quality to them, unless they've got something that somebody likes. He became quite a, he was a living legend. He was an idol. We should all be glad in my form, in my kind of music. Everybody. It's like Louis Armstrong. If you ever played a horn or sang the blues, you owe Louis Armstrong. Well, I think if you do a little rock and roll or maybe a little gospel blues or something, or what we know as that pop trend, you owe Elvis. Elvis started it, you know.
You know, he's still a hero to a lot of people, young and old.
It's a nostalgic music to me, because I grew up in the 50s. That was some of the first rock and roll I ever heard. And then in the 60s also it stayed in, and then eventually getting to record with him, it's a standout thing. Like Heartbreak Hotel, when I remember that so well, and then we just recorded that, you know, a re-recording of this project. And when they played the old tape, it just brought back a flood of memories from the 50s. This is a picture that was taken by the Commercial Appeal in Memphis in 1969-70 when we did those sessions. This is Bobby Wood. This is me. This is Tommy Carbill, who's deceased. He was also a bass player on a lot of these dates. Gene Chrisman, who is a drummer and still active. And what's his name here in the middle? And then Bobby Emmons, who's a keyboard player and songwriter. He's still active here. And Reggie Young, who's on these sessions, along with Bobby Wood and myself.
He did a lot of movies. He identified with a certain kind of youth movement in the 50s, a kind of rebelliousness, a kind of stepping out from the watershed of the World War II emotional experience that war had. And when he came in the 50s, he represented something similar to what Marlon Brando and what James Dean did with Blackboard Jungle. Remember that movie, and Rebel Without a Cause and that sort of thing? But beyond that, he went on into the 60s, through the Beatles area, you see, and on up into the 70s. And there's no figure that I know that's ever done that. They generally come up to a point and they stop historically, and then something else takes over. But Elvis was constantly going through all those different periods, assuming different kinds of aspects in his own career.
I try to create, through the use of a soloist, the personality of the performer. Since you don't have the lyrics, obviously, in an instrumental record, you try to get that interpretation through an instrumental soloist who has his own personality. That's why somebody like Boots Randolph, who has so much soul in the way he performs. And so with the other performers, you're trying to get, that's the way you translate the lyrics into an instrumental idea.
Elvis felt about his music, I think, like it was a life that he wanted to live. I think it answered some of the questions of his early childhood, his life, where he lived and where he came from. Coming through Memphis, I think, meant a lot to him and to his style.
Elvis, this is not in the form of a question, but I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you home for everybody in Memphis and the South.
Well, thank you. You'll never know how happy I am to be here. Someone asked me this morning, what did I miss about Memphis? And I said, everything.
The reason I say this is because of all the gospel-oriented situations in Mississippi and the South. Now, it wasn't religious. Don't get me wrong. There's somewhat difference between religious music and gospel music, although they both may be trended in the same direction. But gospel music's a happy thing. It's like New Orleans gospel. Music in New Orleans, like Pete Fountain would play, or some of those guys, great blues players or singers down there. Hank Williams wrote a lot of gospel stuff. And the South has always been rich in heritage with gospel. And it was a natural evolution for Elvis to come from that and go right into what he did. The gospel thing was the biggest part of his life because it became part of the excitement of his singing.
The thing that he left us, all the history and everything, and the memories and everything is, that's always going to be part of us. It's going to be part of music, I think, for a long time to come still.